It was the kind of courtroom moment that made headlines for days, maybe even weeks. The stakes were sky high, the tension palpable, and the entire nation was watching. But none of that mattered to Elon Musk. He sat there, as calm and collected as ever, hands folded on the table in front of him, as Judge William Hartman, a man known for his strict adherence to the law, prepared to deliver his ruling. The courtroom was filled with anticipation. A hush swept through the room as Hartman adjusted his glasses, staring down at the stack of papers before him. This wasn't just any case. This was a battle between one of the richest men on the planet and the system that was supposed to hold him accountable. Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, had allegedly violated several regulations regarding his space company's operations, and now, the court was poised to impose a massive fine. But as the judge stood to announce the decision, Musk didn't flinch. He wasn't worried. He didn't need to be. The man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and even artificial intelligence was used to challenges far bigger than this. But this wasn't just a legal issue, this was a battle for his reputation, his company's, and perhaps even his future. You have been found in violation of several key regulations concerning the operation of SpaceX, Judge Hartman's voice rang out in the courtroom, steady and sure. As a result, this court is issuing a fine of. The words hung in the air. The room held its breath. How much was Musk going to have to pay? What would this mean for his empire? The anticipation was almost unbearable. But then, before the judge could finish, Musk raised a hand, casual, almost nonchalant. It was a simple gesture, but it carried with it the weight of someone who had never backed down from a challenge in his life. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice smooth, "I don't think you're seeing the full picture here. Let me explain." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Everyone knew Musk's reputation for being unconventional, for doing the impossible. But this? This was different. This was a legal battle, and for the first time in a long time, it seemed like Musk was about to face a very real consequence. But there he was, as calm as ever, challenging the judge's authority. Judge Hartman paused, his eyebrows raised in surprise. This wasn't the kind of behavior he was used to. He was a man of order, a man who had worked his whole career to uphold the law. And here was this billionaire, this tech mogul, trying to dismiss everything he had worked for. It irritated him, but it also intrigued him. What was Musk up to? The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Musk, this court is not a place for games. You have been found guilty of breaking the law. The fine is substantial, and it will be enforced." But Musk didn't back down. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes locking with the judge's. "Actually, Your Honor, I believe you've misinterpreted the regulations. If you look at the specifics, you'll find that the law is outdated. It wasn't built to handle the kind of work I'm doing with SpaceX." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The lawyers, the journalists, the onlookers, they all leaned in, sensing something monumental was about to unfold. Musk wasn't just challenging the fine, he was challenging the very system that had been put in place to regulate companies like his. Judge Hartman narrowed his eyes. "I'm well aware of the intricacies of the law, Mr. Musk. And I don't take kindly to being told I've made a mistake." Musk smiled, the kind of smile that only someone who had outwitted countless opponents could muster. "I'm not suggesting you made a mistake, Your Honor. I'm suggesting that the law needs to catch up with the times." The tension in the room was thick. It felt like a high-stakes game of chess, with Musk making every move deliberately, each one calculated to provoke, to challenge, and to reshape the very nature of the case at hand. It was clear now that this wasn't just about a fine. Musk was playing a much bigger game. Judge Hartman was no fool. He had spent decades in the courtroom, and he had dealt with his fair share of high-profile cases. But this? This was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Musk wasn't just a defendant, he was a disruptor. And Hartman, despite his best efforts, could feel the walls of his certainty starting to crack. Musk continued, his tone unwavering. You see, Your Honor, when you've spent years pushing the boundaries of what's possible, you start to realize that the rules we've lived by for so long don't always apply. SpaceX isn't just another company. It's a glimpse into the future. A future that the law wasn't designed to handle. Hartman shifted in his seat. He didn't like being put in a position where his authority was questioned. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the underlying truth in Musk's words. The world was changing at an unprecedented pace, and the legal system seemed to be struggling to keep up. Was Musk right? Was the law truly outdated? The room seemed to hold its breath as the judge stared at Musk, contemplating his next move. The fine that had seemed so straightforward moments ago now felt like a small detail in a much larger battle. And Musk? He was playing the long game, fully aware that this wasn't just about winning this case. It was about shaping the future. So, Musk continued, before we proceed, I'd like to propose a different solution. One that doesn't involve a fine, but instead a rethinking of how we regulate innovation in this country. After all, I'm not the only one pushing the envelope. It's time for the law to evolve. Judge Hartman leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had no intention of letting Musk off the hook without consequences. But something in Musk's words, the calmness with which he spoke, made the judge pause. Was this really about the fine? Or was this about something much bigger? I'll take your argument into consideration, Mr. Musk, the judge said, his voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. But don't mistake my willingness to listen for weakness. This court will follow the law. Musk didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gave a slight nod, as though he had already won, before leaning back in his chair, his eyes scanning the room. The tension was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's voice rang in the back of the courtroom, even if he didn't speak the words aloud. For now, the case would continue. But everyone in the room knew that it was no longer just about whether Musk would pay the fine. This was a battle for the future. And Musk was in control. Elon Musk was not born into luxury, despite the wealth and influence he now commands. His story begins on a cold day in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, when he was born to a Canadian mother, May, and a South African father, Errol. From the moment he was born, Musk seemed destined to do things differently, and he would not easily conform to the expectations that the world placed on him. Growing up, his family was far from wealthy. His parents, both highly intelligent individuals, provided him with what they could, but the environment in which Musk was raised wasn't easy. He was a lonely child, a dreamer who spent more time with books and his computer than with other children. Musk's early years were marked by a sense of isolation. He wasn't the typical kid. He would often spend hours reading, building models, and experimenting with technology. At just 12 years old, he taught himself computer programming, and by the time he was in high school, he had already created and sold a video game called Blaster for $500. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite his passion for creating and problem solving. While his early life was defined by a sense of being different, there was also a deep drive for success, something he inherited from both his parents. His mother was a model and a dietitian, while his father was an electromechanical engineer and a businessman. Musk often talks about how his parents' divorce and the emotional strain of his youth were formative experiences. His relationship with his father, in particular, was complicated, and Musk has frequently described it as a source of deep conflict in his life. Musk's academic journey was another important part of his story. After attending several schools in South Africa, he moved to Canada at 17 to attend Queen's University. His decision to leave South Africa was largely influenced by his desire to escape the racial tensions and limited opportunities in his homeland. He had big dreams, dreams that couldn't be confined by the rigid structures of his environment. Musk's decision to move to North America opened the door to a new life. A life where he could push boundaries, explore new ideas, and take risks that others might shy away from. At Queen's, Musk met a group of like-minded individuals who encouraged him to think bigger. After 2 years, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. By this time, Musk had already begun to see the potential for technology to change the world, and he was determined to be part of that revolution. While studying at Penn, Musk made the first of many life-altering decisions. Rather than take a traditional career path, he dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after just 2 days, choosing instead to dive headfirst into the world of business and technology. It was a bold move, one that would define his career trajectory. In 1995, he co-founded Zip2, a company that provided online maps and business directories to newspapers. A few years later, he sold Zip2 for nearly $300 million, a sum that would only scratch the surface of what was to come. From there, Musk's ventures only grew bolder and more ambitious. He co-founded X.com, an online payment company that eventually became PayPal, which was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. With the wealth he accumulated, Musk embarked on a journey that would change the world: space exploration, electric vehicles, and clean energy. Each of Musk's ventures seemed to build on the last, each more audacious and groundbreaking than the one before. SpaceX, founded in 2002, was perhaps his most ambitious project, aimed at reducing the cost of space travel and making life multiplanetary. Tesla, founded in 2003, sought to revolutionize the automotive industry by creating electric vehicles that were not just environmentally friendly, but desirable and high-performance. Along the way, he also acquired SolarCity, and his brainchild, Neuralink, aimed to push the boundaries of human-computer interfaces. But all this success came with its share of personal cost. Musk's first marriage to Justine Wilson ended in divorce, and his second marriage to actress Tallulah Riley also ended in a bitter split. Musk's third marriage, to singer Claire Boucher, better known as Grimes, was a whirlwind, and their relationship, though highly publicized, remained a subject of intrigue and speculation. Musk's personal life, like his professional life, was marked by constant change and unpredictability. He was not the type to adhere to conventional norms or follow the standard path. Musk was constantly in the media spotlight, scrutinized for his opinions, his relationships, and, of course, his businesses. He built an empire out of risk-taking, innovation, and sheer willpower. And yet, despite his successes, Musk was never immune to failure. His companies faced setbacks, public criticism, and financial turmoil, but Musk always persevered. This willingness to take risks, to embrace the unknown, is what set him apart. It wasn't just about money or fame, it was about creating a future that seemed almost impossible. Musk wasn't afraid to fail, and in fact, he saw failure as an essential step toward progress. It was this mindset that made him the visionary he was, and also the target of intense scrutiny. People loved him. People hated him. But no one could ignore him. Musk's larger-than-life personality and revolutionary ideas made him a polarizing figure. In the business world, he was a genius. In the courtroom, he was a lightning rod. His ability to innovate and challenge the status quo had led him to this moment, standing in a courtroom, facing down a judge who was determined to teach him a lesson about following the law. But to understand Musk, to understand why he believed he could outsmart the court, you had to look at his history. His entire life had been a challenge to the established norms, a refusal to accept that something couldn't be done simply because it hadn't been done before. Musk wasn't just looking to win the case, he was looking to redefine what it meant to be successful in a world governed by outdated systems. And as Judge Hartman prepared to deliver his ruling, Musk wasn't just playing the part of the defendant. He was playing the part of a revolutionary, willing to risk everything for a vision of the future that was beyond anyone's current comprehension. It wasn't arrogance. It was his unwavering belief in the potential of technology, the power of innovation, and the idea that, just maybe, the rules needed to change. The courtroom tension had reached a breaking point. Judge Hartman's gaze, once stern and unwavering, was now mixed with a sense of doubt that flickered behind his authoritative exterior. His courtroom was a space where the law was king, and those who broke it were held accountable, no exceptions. But Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur who had revolutionized multiple industries, was challenging that very principle. The case had begun simply enough, with a clear violation of regulations by SpaceX, Musk's ambitious space company that had been pushing the boundaries of commercial space travel. There were claims that SpaceX had ignored federal safety standards and failed to meet environmental regulations. These were serious accusations, and they had the potential to result in hefty fines and significant reputational damage. The public interest was enormous, with every move in the courtroom covered by major news outlets. The opening days of the trial were as expected. Standard, procedural, with lawyers from both sides delivering their arguments, calling experts, and presenting evidence. Musk's defense team argued that SpaceX's contributions to space exploration were vital to the future of humanity and that the regulations in place were outdated, stifling innovation. In response, the prosecution, led by the formidable district attorney Rachel Hayes, painted Musk as a reckless billionaire who was too used to breaking the rules in the name of progress. But the real drama didn't begin until Musk himself took the stand. Judge Hartman had expected a typical defense, a legal argument that pointed to technicalities, legal loopholes, and perhaps a few appeals to the jury's sense of fairness. But Musk had other plans. He was not here just to fight a fine, he was here to redefine the rules of the game. And as he stood, answering questions with a calm, measured tone, the courtroom began to feel the heat of the moment. Musk's opening statement was blunt. The law, as it stands today, wasn't built for the challenges we face in the 21st century. Space exploration, renewable energy, and technological advancements, they all push the boundaries of what's possible. But the law hasn't kept pace. I'm not just challenging a fine. I'm challenging an entire system that's been holding back progress for decades. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Musk had delivered his message clearly. He wasn't interested in simply defending himself. He was positioning himself as a symbol for the future, a future that the current legal framework couldn't accommodate. District Attorney Hayes was not one to be easily rattled. She'd seen her fair share of high-profile cases, but Musk's presence in the courtroom felt different. She stood tall, cool under pressure, and fired back with precision. Mr. Musk, with all due respect, your companies aren't above the law. The regulations are in place for a reason. They protect the public, the environment, and the future of space exploration. Just because you're a billionaire doesn't mean you're exempt from accountability. The two locked eyes, each understanding the weight of their words. Hayes wasn't intimidated, but Musk's confidence was undeniable. He didn't speak with the arrogance of someone trying to win a legal case. He spoke as if he were laying the foundation for something much larger than himself. This wasn't just about money or reputation. This was about shifting the paradigm. The conflict had moved from the legal to the philosophical. The stakes had skyrocketed. What began as a straightforward legal battle now felt like a collision of two worlds, one that represented the established order, and another that sought to tear down the walls that held it in place. Musk's legal team continued to challenge the prosecution's case. They dug into the details of the regulations, finding flaws in the way they were structured. They pointed out that SpaceX's innovations were actually benefiting the public and the environment, not harming them. Tesla's electric vehicles were reducing emissions. SpaceX was advancing space exploration in ways NASA could only dream of. But most importantly, Musk's lawyers argued that the regulations SpaceX had allegedly violated were relics of a bygone era, unfit for the modern age. Judge Hartman listened attentively, his brow furrowed as he weighed Musk's arguments. It was clear he was grappling with something bigger than the case at hand. For the first time in his career, the judge felt the pressure of a rapidly changing world. The law had always been black and white, but Musk's presence made everything seem gray. And the public had taken notice. News outlets were having a field day, broadcasting Musk's every word as if they were part of a live political debate. Social media was abuzz, with millions of people weighing in on whether Musk was a hero or a villain. Memes were circulating, mocking the legal system for its inability to keep up with technology, while others expressed concerns that Musk was, indeed, overstepping the boundaries of the law. Musk, however, seemed unfazed by the media frenzy. It was as if he welcomed it. He didn't just want to win this case, he wanted to ignite a conversation that would stretch far beyond the confines of the courtroom. The day after Musk's testimony, things took a dramatic turn. Hayes, determined to level the playing field, brought forward an unexpected witness, a former SpaceX engineer who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of internal misconduct at the company. The engineer alleged that there were deliberate efforts to cut corners when it came to safety protocols, and that Musk had turned a blind eye to certain regulatory violations in the name of cost saving. The engineer's testimony sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Musk's defense team scrambled to respond, but the damage was done. The public perception of Musk's companies was beginning to shift. His reputation was now on the line, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. Judge Hartman seized on the opportunity to challenge Musk's motives. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice sharp, "you've made it clear that you don't believe the law is sufficient to regulate the work you do. But how do you reconcile your claims of cutting-edge innovation with the accusations of negligence and safety violations? Do your companies have a different set of rules to follow?" Musk's response was measured, but it carried a hint of defiance. "What I'm saying, Your Honor, is that the world is changing, and the systems in place haven't kept up. We need to find a balance between progress and regulation, between the rule of law and the need for innovation. But that's not something we'll figure out in a courtroom, it's a much larger conversation." The room was electric. Musk's words were as bold as ever, and his confidence seemed unshaken. He wasn't just defending himself, he was defending a vision of the future, a future where the law would have to evolve to accommodate the advancements of the modern world. As the courtroom session came to a close, it was clear that the conflict was far from over. But something had changed. The stakes had risen beyond a simple fine. Elon Musk wasn't just fighting for his companies anymore. He was fighting for the future, and for the right to innovate without the constraints of outdated rules. The question now was whether the law, and those who enforced it, would bend to accommodate Musk's vision, or if it would break him first. The courtroom was quieter now, a tension hanging in the air as the days dragged on. Judge Hartman sat at the head of the room, his gavel poised, ready to strike, yet unsure of how to deal with the storm that was brewing. This was no longer just a legal battle, it had become something far more significant. Elon Musk had turned the case into a cultural touchstone. The media, the public, and even legal experts were all on edge, waiting for the inevitable climax. Musk's testimony had stirred something deep within the public consciousness. The words innovation and progress had become rallying cries for those who supported him. But they also served to intensify the accusations against him. Was he really pushing boundaries, or was he simply looking for a loophole to avoid accountability? His defense of his companies was nothing short of remarkable, but the allegations from the former SpaceX engineer had cast a shadow over Musk's argument. The stakes had shifted from a fine to a much deeper existential question. Is the law prepared for the kind of future Musk is trying to create? As the trial continued, Musk's team dug in, seeking out every possible flaw in the prosecution's case. They filed motions, they brought in experts, and they uncovered inconsistencies in the evidence. But as much as Musk and his team tried to dismantle the charges, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He wasn't just fighting to protect his companies, he was fighting for his legacy, his vision, and his sense of self. In private, Musk was grappling with the personal toll the trial was taking. He wasn't the same confident billionaire who had faced down the establishment in the world of business. He was a man fighting against something far larger than himself, a system that was unwilling to evolve, a society that was reluctant to embrace the future. His work with SpaceX had been the pinnacle of his life's ambition. The idea of opening up space for humanity was no longer just a business venture, it was a mission. A mission that might fall apart because of bureaucratic hurdles and outdated regulations. Musk knew the risks. He knew that if he lost this case, it would set a precedent. A precedent that could stifle innovation for years, even decades. If he couldn't win this battle, he couldn't continue his mission to make humanity a multiplanetary species. And that's what kept him awake at night. The idea of letting the world's future slip away because of an outdated legal system was more terrifying than any failure in business. While Musk wrestled with his thoughts, the courtroom drama intensified. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Hayes, was relentless. Every piece of evidence was meticulously presented. Every possible angle was explored. She was determined to prove that Musk's companies had not just broken the law, but had done so knowingly and deliberately. For Hayes, this wasn't just about SpaceX or Tesla. It was about ensuring that no one, no matter how powerful, could get away with ignoring the rules. Mr. Musk, Hayes said in one of her closing arguments, you have no respect for the very systems that have made this country great. You seek to bypass regulation, to bend the rules to your will, and in doing so, you risk the safety of the very people you claim to serve. The law exists for a reason, to protect, to regulate, and to ensure that even the brightest minds do not put the public in jeopardy. You stand before us not as an innovator, but as a man who has placed his own desires ahead of the greater good. The word stung, and Musk could feel the weight of her accusations, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when he knew the potential of what he had started. Space exploration, electric vehicles, renewable energy, these weren't just businesses to him. They were the future of humanity. And if he could push past the barriers, if he could navigate the minefield of legal hurdles, he could change everything. But the trial wasn't the only thing weighing on Musk. As the legal proceedings dragged on, the pressure began to spill over into his personal life. His relationship with Grimes, his partner, had become strained. The constant public scrutiny of their relationship, combined with the stresses of the trial, was taking its toll. Musk had always been a man driven by a sense of purpose, but that purpose had now become something of an obsession. He couldn't stop thinking about the case, about the future, and about the millions of people depending on him to succeed. Grimes, ever the artist, tried to remind Musk of the importance of balance. You can't change the world if you're constantly running from one battle to the next, she told him one evening, as they sat in a quiet room, far from the courtroom chaos. You need to step back, breathe, and remember why you started this journey in the first place. It wasn't for the accolades or the fame, it was for something greater. Musk didn't know how to respond. He had become so absorbed in the fight that he had lost sight of the bigger picture. Grimes' words hit him hard, but he also knew she was right. If he didn't win this battle, the entire future he had envisioned could slip away. His vision of Mars, of a world powered by renewable energy, of humanity's leap into the stars, these were dreams that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Back in the courtroom, things were about to take a dramatic turn. Musk's legal team had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to find new ways to discredit the prosecution's star witness, the former SpaceX engineer. They had uncovered new evidence that suggested the engineer's testimony wasn't as credible as it appeared. And they were ready to present it. The dramatic twist came when Musk's lawyers filed a motion to have the engineer's testimony struck from the record, claiming that the engineer had been coerced into giving false statements. Musk's team argued that the prosecution had failed to provide adequate proof that the allegations against SpaceX were legitimate. The motion was bold, and it had the potential to change everything. Judge Hartman, who had remained largely silent throughout the trial, now found himself at a crossroads. The evidence was compelling, but the implications of this move were enormous. Could he really dismiss the testimony of a key witness? Would it be enough to sway the jury in Musk's favor? The stakes had never been higher. Musk, in a way, had already won something more than a legal battle. He had made the world sit up and pay attention to the realities of innovation in the 21st century. The courtroom had become a battleground for the future itself, and whether he won or lost, Musk was reshaping the narrative. The final decisions were about to be made, and no one, Musk included, knew what the outcome would be. Would the judge rule in his favor, allowing the future he had envisioned to move forward? Or would the legal system, with all its tradition and restraint, pull the curtain on Musk's ambitious dreams? The world was waiting to find out. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every seat was filled, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. It had been weeks since the first day of trial, but now the end was in sight. The outcome of this case would not just affect Elon Musk, it would set a precedent that could reverberate across industries and beyond. The world was watching, and every moment seemed like it could tip the scales one way or the other. Elon Musk had been holding it together, but even he couldn't deny the mounting pressure. In recent days, his confidence had wavered. He had always believed in his mission. His conviction that SpaceX, Tesla, and his other ventures were part of a larger vision for humanity's future. But now, as the trial reached its peak, he couldn't shake the doubt that had begun creeping into his mind. What if all of this, the dream of getting to Mars, of revolutionizing transportation and energy, was being threatened by something as simple as an outdated regulation, or worse, by his own failure to properly navigate the legal landscape? The courtroom fell silent as Judge Hartman called for order. The motion to strike the testimony of the former SpaceX engineer had been denied, and Musk's defense team had no choice but to present their closing arguments. The pressure was mounting, and it was clear that both sides were prepared to go to any lengths to win. The defense's closing argument was delivered by one of Musk's top lawyers, a sharp and no-nonsense litigator named David Carter. He stood before the jury with a commanding presence, speaking not just to the facts of the case, but to the larger narrative that had emerged over the past few weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Carter began, his voice steady but filled with urgency, "what you've heard over the past few weeks isn't just a battle over regulations. It's a battle over the future. Over whether we as a society are going to embrace progress, innovation, and the vision of the future, or whether we are going to remain shackled by outdated laws and obsolete thinking." He paused, allowing his words to settle. The tension in the room was suffocating. Mr. Musk and his companies have pushed the boundaries in ways that have changed the world for the better. From electric cars to private space travel, he's proven that innovation is not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated. And yes, there have been challenges along the way. But to suggest that Mr. Musk has acted with disregard for safety, or that he's intentionally broken the law, is simply not true. Carter's words hung in the air. For a moment, Musk allowed himself to believe. He had always been an optimist, but in this case, even he had to admit that hope was all he had left. The stakes were too high. If the jury sided with the prosecution, everything he had worked for could come crumbling down. But the emotional climax of the trial wasn't just in the legal arguments, it was in what happened next. The prosecution's closing statement, led by District Attorney Hayes, was fierce. She was a woman on a mission, and she wasn't about to let Musk off the hook. As she stood before the jury, her eyes locked onto Musk's with an intensity that was almost palpable. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice cutting through the silence, "we've heard a lot about progress, innovation, and changing the world. But at the end of the day, the question is simple: does anyone get a free pass? Does anyone, no matter how powerful, have the right to break the law without consequence?" She paused, her gaze now sweeping across the room, addressing each juror as though trying to connect with them on a personal level. "You see, this case is not about progress, or about a man's dreams of taking humanity to Mars. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that no one, no matter how much money they have, can ignore the rules that keep us safe, that protect the environment, and that ensure we all have a fair chance at a future." The courtroom was eerily quiet as Hayes's words landed. The sharpness of her delivery was calculated, designed to make the jury see the larger picture, that Musk's disregard for regulations, if proven true, was a danger not just to his companies, but to the society that relied on those regulations to function. Then came the twist that no one saw coming. As Hayes wrapped up her argument, she glanced toward the back of the courtroom. The door opened, and a figure stepped forward, someone no one expected to see. It was the former SpaceX engineer who had initially testified against Musk. But now, he was standing in the doorway, his face pale and his posture stiff. There was an uncomfortable silence as everyone turned to face him. "Your Honor," the engineer said, his voice trembling slightly, "I need to correct something. I made a mistake. The things I said on the stand, they weren't entirely true. I was coerced into making those statements. I didn't want to be a part of this. I've been under a lot of pressure, and I'm sorry." The room fell into stunned silence. Elon Musk's heart raced. He had been prepared for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of what it meant. The engineer's testimony had been one of the key pieces of evidence against him. If it was invalidated now, it could change everything. Judge Hartman was visibly taken aback. "Are you saying your testimony was false?" he asked, his voice cold but not without a hint of surprise. "Yes, Your Honor," the engineer said, his voice steadier now. "I've been under pressure from the prosecution to say what they wanted. I've seen the impact this case is having, and I can't keep lying. I was wrong." The bombshell revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Musk's legal team immediately moved to strike the engineer's testimony from the record. The prosecution, clearly caught off guard, scrambled to reassess their case. But for Musk, the moment was bittersweet. He had just been handed a lifeline, but it was hard to ignore the emotional toll it had taken on him. The fight had been long and grueling. There had been moments of doubt, moments when he had wondered if the dream he had worked so hard to build was slipping away. As the judge called for a recess, Musk stood silently in the middle of the room. He was relieved, yes, but also conflicted. He had won the legal battle, for now, but he knew the war was far from over. What would the future hold for him, his companies, and the vision he had fought so hard to make a reality? For the first time in weeks, Musk allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had just weathered the storm, but the real journey was still ahead. He was no longer just fighting for a legal victory, he was fighting for something much greater, the future of humanity. And that, he knew, would require more than just clever arguments and courtroom tactics, it would require vision, perseverance, and above all, the willingness to keep pushing forward, no matter the obstacles in his way. The courtroom would decide his fate in the coming days, but Musk's journey was far from over. The world was watching, and it was clear that this was just the beginning. The day after the dramatic courtroom revelation, a hush seemed to have settled over the city. Elon Musk had, in a sense, dodged a bullet. The testimony of the former SpaceX engineer had been discredited, and with it, the bulk of the prosecution's case had crumbled. But the emotional toll of the trial still lingered. It wasn't just about a win in court anymore, it was about what came next, and whether the world was truly ready to embrace the kind of future Musk envisioned. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense, as lawyers filed motions, prepared arguments, and discussed the next steps. Outside, the media frenzy was already in full swing. Cameras and reporters lined the sidewalks, hoping for a glimpse of Musk as he walked in and out of the courtroom. The trial had become more than just a legal issue, it was a public spectacle, a clash of ideals, and a showdown between the forces of progress and tradition. Musk sat in the back of his office, alone for the first time in days. His mind was racing. The thought of losing this case had haunted him for weeks, and now that he had won, the victory felt hollow. He had fought for more than just his companies, he had fought for a vision. But the vision seemed more fragile now than it had ever been before. His lawyer, David Carter, had called him earlier in the day to deliver the good news. The judge has agreed to strike the testimony from the record. The prosecution's case is severely weakened. We should be in the clear, Carter had said. But Musk hadn't felt the excitement he expected. He'd felt a sense of numbness instead. The victory had come with so many strings attached, so many questions about what the future might hold. Even if he had won this battle, would the world continue to challenge him at every step? Would he always have to fight just to keep his dreams alive? The thing that worried Musk the most wasn't the legal ramifications, it was the realization that the system wasn't built for the kind of future he was working to create. His businesses, his mission to reach Mars, his push for sustainable energy, none of it fit neatly within the boundaries of the laws and regulations that had existed for decades. He was pushing boundaries, and in doing so, he had learned just how difficult it was to navigate a system that wasn't ready for such disruption. Musk looked out of his office window, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. The city sprawled beneath him, a bustling reminder of how far humanity had come, but also how far it still had to go. He had always believed in the power of innovation to change the world. But now, after everything he'd been through, he understood more than ever that innovation didn't happen in a vacuum. It collided with the present, with systems of power, with entrenched interests, and sometimes, it collided with the very people who stood in the way of progress. But as he stood there, looking out over the city, something else stirred within him, a sense of resolve. He had faced one of the toughest challenges of his career, and while the battle wasn't over, he had learned valuable lessons. Most importantly, he had learned that change couldn't just be willed into existence, it had to be fought for, tooth and nail. There would always be resistance, but that resistance was often the very thing that made success so sweet. "You okay?" she asked gently, sitting beside him. She didn't press for answers, she simply sat with him in silence, offering a kind of comfort he hadn't realized he needed. "I'm fine," Musk said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I won the case, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like enough. I've been fighting for this dream for so long, but the closer I get, the more I realize how much resistance there is. It's like I'm running uphill, and every time I think I'm at the top, there's another hill." Grimes nodded. "I get it. It's easy to forget that change takes time. It's not just about breaking the rules, it's about making new ones. You're not just fighting for SpaceX or Tesla, you're fighting for the future. But that future? It doesn't just appear. You've got to build it, piece by piece, no matter how hard it gets." Her words, simple as they were, struck a chord. Musk had always been driven by a sense of urgency. Every failure, every challenge, felt like it was a step backward. But Grimes was right. Change didn't come in one great leap, it came slowly, through relentless persistence, even when it seemed like the odds were insurmountable. The courtroom drama had ended, but for Musk, the real work had just begun. This was just one battle in a much larger war. He had no illusion that the road ahead would be easy. There would be more trials, more battles, both legal and personal. But Musk knew one thing for sure, he would never stop pushing forward. No matter how high the hills got, he would keep climbing. The day of the final verdict arrived. The courtroom was packed once again, but this time, there was a quiet optimism in the air. The prosecution had been unable to recover from the blow dealt by the engineer's retraction. Musk's legal team was confident that the jury would find in his favor. Judge Hartman entered the room, and the tension mounted as he took his seat. He glanced over at Musk, his face unreadable. Then, with a solemn voice, he spoke. "After careful consideration, I have ruled that the testimony of the former SpaceX engineer is inadmissible. The prosecution has failed to provide sufficient evidence to support their claims. The case is dismissed." A collective breath was exhaled throughout the room. Musk's team exchanged silent nods of relief, while the prosecution stood, stunned and defeated. For Musk, it was a victory, but it was more than just a legal win. It was a personal triumph. He had faced the storm, weathered the doubts, and come out the other side stronger than before. As the courtroom emptied, Musk stood alone for a moment. His journey had been long, and it wasn't over yet. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the world was ready for the future he was trying to build. He wasn't just fighting for his companies, he was fighting for humanity's future. And no matter the hurdles, no matter the obstacles, that fight would continue. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones you can't see, Musk thought, as he left the courtroom and stepped into the future. The world had changed that day, but in the end, it was Musk who had changed the world. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind for Elon Musk. The victory, though hard-won, had not brought him the peace he had hoped for. The legal battle was over, but it had stirred something deep inside him, something that had always been there but was now more prominent than ever before. He had fought to secure his vision for the future, and in doing so, he had learned just how heavy that vision could be. Musk had spent years pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Tesla had revolutionized the automotive industry, SpaceX had redefined space travel, and his ventures into artificial intelligence and energy had begun to reshape entire sectors. Yet, with every success, the burden had grown heavier. There was always a new challenge, a new obstacle, a new way in which the world tried to slow him down or hold him back. But as he sat in his office overlooking the sprawling campus of SpaceX, Musk realized that the fight wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of humanity, about whether or not the world was ready to embrace the kind of radical change he believed in. The pressure weighed on him like an invisible force, a constant reminder that his mission wasn't just about making money or building companies. It was about something far more profound. The survival of the human race. Musk had often spoken of his desire to get humanity to Mars, not just as a way to push the boundaries of exploration, but as a backup plan for the future of civilization. He believed that one day, the Earth might no longer be habitable, whether due to environmental disaster, overpopulation, or a more unforeseen catastrophe. Mars, he argued, was humanity's insurance policy. It was the next step in the journey of human evolution. But now, in the quiet moments after the trial, Musk couldn't help but wonder if he had been too focused on the future to see the challenges of the present. The courtroom had made him realize something he hadn't fully acknowledged before: the system wasn't built to handle the kind of rapid change he was pushing for. Laws, regulations, and societal structures were designed to maintain the status quo, not to accommodate the kind of disruption Musk was championing. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The world was evolving at an unprecedented pace, and he had been at the forefront of that evolution. But the trials he had faced, and the ones that still lay ahead, had shown him how fragile progress could be. No one understood that better than he did. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," he said, sitting up and composing himself. It was David Carter, his lead attorney, holding a file in his hands. Musk had grown accustomed to seeing Carter over the past few weeks, as they navigated the legal aftermath of the trial. The lawyer sat down across from him, placing the file on the desk. "Good news," Carter said, his usual calm demeanor betraying a hint of excitement. "The judge's ruling has held. The case is officially closed. No further legal action will be taken." Musk nodded, but the sense of relief that Carter had expected him to feel didn't quite reach him. He appreciated the victory, of course, but the weight of the bigger picture was still heavy on his shoulders. "That's good," Musk said, his voice distant. "But what now?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Musk let out a sigh, standing up and walking over to the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the sprawling Tesla factory in the distance. The view was beautiful, but it didn't bring him the peace it once had. "I mean, what's next?" Musk repeated, turning back to face Carter. "I won this case. But what's the point if we're not moving fast enough? The world is changing, but it feels like it's not changing fast enough. I feel like I'm always fighting an uphill battle, even when I win." Carter stood up and walked over to join him by the window. "You're not alone in feeling that way. This kind of change, it's not easy. It takes time. But what you're doing, it's bigger than all of us. You're pushing the world forward, and it's not going to happen overnight. You have to give people time to catch up." Musk looked out over the factory again, his eyes narrowing as he thought about what Carter had said. He knew his lawyer was right. But the frustration still gnawed at him. The world wasn't waiting for him to catch up. It never had. And for Musk, that had always been the driving force, time was the one thing he couldn't afford to waste. Do you ever think about whether we're doing enough? Musk asked, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. Carter paused for a moment before replying, I think about it every day. But I also know that without people like you, there wouldn't even be the possibility of change. What you're doing isn't just about what happens in this lifetime. It's about what happens long after we're gone. You're laying the foundation for the future. Musk didn't respond right away. He was thinking about everything, the trials, the pressure, the responsibility. And while Carter's words were meant to reassure him, they also carried a reminder of just how much was at stake. The future was something Musk believed in with every fiber of his being. But it wasn't just about Mars or electric cars, it was about creating a world that could survive, evolve, and thrive. A world that could outlast the mistakes of the past and forge a new path forward. Maybe you're right, Musk finally said, a faint sense of determination returning to his voice. Maybe I need to focus less on the battles and more on the vision. But it's hard, you know. Every day feels like a new fight. Carter gave a reassuring smile. That's because you're fighting for something worth fighting for. And no matter how hard it gets, you've always come out on top. So, what's next? Musk took a deep breath and turned back to the window. The horizon was now tinged with the colors of the setting sun, fiery reds and oranges, stretching out as far as the eye could see. Next. Musk said, his tone resolute. Next, we build faster. We push harder. We move humanity forward. Carter's smile widened. That's the spirit. Musk nodded, a sense of calm returning to him as the weight of responsibility settled once again on his shoulders. He had learned a lot over the past few months, about the world, about the law, and about himself. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had only just begun. The challenges would never stop coming. But as long as there was a chance to change the world for the better, he would continue pushing, no matter what. Because in the end, the future wasn't just something to be dreamed about. It was something to be built. And that, Musk knew, was a job he was more than willing to take on. The world was ready for change, he just had to make sure it was ready for him. And so, the fight continued. The following months saw a profound shift in Elon Musk's perspective. The legal battle, while exhausting, had opened his eyes to the realities of the systems in place and the deeply ingrained resistance to the change he so fervently believed in. But as the dust settled, Musk's determination only grew stronger. He was driven not only by the goals he had set for himself and his companies but by a deeper understanding of what the future could be if humanity embraced innovation at its core. As Musk stood on the balcony of his Tesla residence, watching the stars flicker into view as the evening sky deepened into night, he reflected on the profound responsibility that rested on his shoulders. SpaceX was now on the cusp of launching its most ambitious mission yet, the first crewed flight to Mars. And Tesla was rapidly growing, expanding its influence beyond just electric vehicles to include sustainable energy solutions on a global scale. His ventures were more than just business. They were a mission to alter the very course of human history. Despite the victories and achievements, the pressure of leading such monumental initiatives began to wear on him. At times, it felt as if there was no end to the hurdles, whether it was regulatory challenges, unexpected technical setbacks, or societal pushback. Elon had always known that nothing worth pursuing would come easily, but sometimes, the weight of it all made him question whether he was prepared for the overwhelming responsibility. One evening, after another series of intense meetings with both Tesla and SpaceX teams, Elon decided to visit the Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada. The factory had grown to be one of the largest manufacturing plants in the world, pushing the boundaries of automation and sustainability. But for Musk, it was more than just a factory. It was a symbol of the future he envisioned, a future where technology powered humanity's progress, rather than being something to fear or resist. As he walked through the massive halls, watching robots work in harmony alongside human employees, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. The factory floor buzzed with activity, and the sight of so many dedicated people working together to bring his vision to life filled him with pride. But the work wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He stopped at a section where new electric vehicle prototypes were being tested, each one more advanced than the last. The vehicles were sleek, futuristic, and powerful, exactly what he had hoped for when Tesla first set out to revolutionize the automotive industry. But beyond the cars themselves, Musk was focused on the broader implications of his work. If Tesla could shift the transportation industry toward sustainable energy, what else could be achieved? What other industries could be transformed? Elon, a voice called from behind him. Musk turned to see Jerome Guillen, Tesla's president, approaching with a smile. Jerome, Musk greeted, his tone a mix of weariness and warmth. What's the latest? Everything is on track, Jerome replied, adjusting his glasses. We're hitting milestones faster than we anticipated, especially with the new battery technology. The progress is really exciting. We're not just talking about better electric vehicles anymore, we're talking about revolutionizing the entire energy landscape. Musk nodded, but his expression remained focused. That's good. But it's never enough, is it? Jerome raised an eyebrow, sensing the deeper question behind Musk's words. No. It's never enough, he agreed, his voice quieter now. But that's what makes this journey so important, isn't it? You're creating something bigger than all of us, something that will last long after we're gone. Musk turned back toward the prototype vehicles, his thoughts racing. You know, the more we push, the more resistance we get. There are people out there who still don't believe in electric cars, who still don't believe in the energy transition. Sometimes I feel like we're not just fighting against industries, we're fighting against mindsets that have been around for centuries. Yeah, Jerome said, his tone sympathetic. But you've always been the one to take on that fight. And look where we are now. The electric vehicle market is growing exponentially, and the world is finally starting to take notice of sustainable energy. Musk gave a half smile. I know. But the real challenge is getting people to embrace the change, not just accept it because they have to. We need more than just a market shift, we need a cultural shift. People need to see that this is the future, not just the next step. Jerome thought for a moment before responding. The cultural shift will come. It's like everything else. It doesn't happen overnight. But you've made a difference, Elon. You've already made the impossible seem possible. Musk's eyes softened slightly as he regarded his colleague. Maybe. But that's the problem, Jerome. We've gotten so used to being on the cutting edge, we forget how much we've changed already. And there's still so much left to do. Musk wasn't just talking about technology. He was talking about people, their perceptions, their beliefs, their fears. The world had always been slow to embrace new ideas. It had taken decades for electric cars to gain the traction they had today, and even now, there were still skeptics and opponents who clung to the old way of doing things. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm pushing too hard, Musk continued, his voice lower now. What if we're going too fast? What if the world isn't ready for all this change? Jerome clapped him on the back with a smile. Elon, the world will never be ready for change. That's why people like you have to make it happen. It's never about being ready, it's about having the courage to make the world ready. Musk met Jerome's gaze and saw the unwavering belief in his colleague's eyes. It was a reminder of why he had started on this path in the first place. It wasn't about playing it safe or waiting for the right time. It was about making the right time happen. As they walked through the factory together, talking about the future of renewable energy, Musk's mind began to shift. The challenges would always be there, resistance, skepticism, unforeseen obstacles, but that was the nature of progress. It wasn't linear. It wasn't predictable. But it was worth fighting for. A few days later, in a meeting with the SpaceX team, Musk outlined the next steps for Mars colonization. It was a monumental task, but Musk was resolute. The mission to Mars was not just about expanding humanity's presence in space. It was about ensuring the survival of the human race by creating a sustainable backup plan. "We're not just building rockets and ships," Musk said, looking out over the gathered engineers. "We're building the future. The human future. And it's not going to be easy. But if anyone can do it, it's this team. We have the technology, we have the talent, and we have the drive. Let's make it happen." The room erupted in applause, but Musk remained quiet. He wasn't just leading a company or a mission, he was leading a movement. The world was on the cusp of something unprecedented, and Musk was determined to be the one to guide humanity toward the next great chapter of its existence. As he walked out of the meeting room, Musk felt a renewed sense of energy. The winds of change were blowing stronger than ever, and it was his job to harness them. No matter how hard the road ahead might be, he knew that the future was his to create. And with that knowledge, he stepped forward, ready for whatever the next challenge would bring. In the following months, Elon Musk's world continued to grow more complex. Despite his relentless drive, there was always the undercurrent of doubt and resistance. The road to Mars, Tesla's global dominance, and the fight to reshape the energy sector weren't just fraught with technical challenges, they were often embroiled in public scrutiny, corporate politics, and personal sacrifices. The media, always eager for a scandal or sensational story, began to take notice of Musk in a way they never had before. Headlines about his unconventional leadership style, his unfiltered tweets, and the frequent confrontations with regulators became the norm. While Musk had always been a target for those who didn't understand his vision, now, the pressures of leading the future were starting to test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It had been an exhausting week of meetings and late-night calls, and Musk felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Tesla's stock was volatile, as always, but now it had become a point of intense focus for critics who argued that the company was too risky, too dependent on Musk's singular leadership. At SpaceX, the Mars mission faced further delays due to technical setbacks. And to top it all off, a regulatory body had issued a new set of stringent rules for Tesla's self-driving technology, pushing the timeline back further than Musk had hoped. Sitting alone in his office one evening, Elon stared at the skyline of Los Angeles, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The view was breathtaking, but it didn't bring him the comfort it once did. He had always believed that progress and disruption came at a cost, but now, that cost seemed higher than ever before. The negative media coverage was constant, the critics were louder, and for the first time in a long while, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. It was a call from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and COO, who had become one of Musk's closest allies over the years. "Elon, we need to talk," Gwynne said as soon as he answered, her voice tense. "What's going on?" Musk asked, sensing the urgency in her tone. "It's about the Mars mission. We're facing some serious technical issues with the Falcon Heavy. It's not performing to the standards we need for the next launch, and we may need to delay the mission further," she explained. Musk's mind immediately began to race. He had anticipated delays, but not on this scale. The pressure to get to Mars was mounting. Not just from SpaceX's investors and stakeholders but from the entire world. He had promised that humanity would reach the red planet within the next decade, and now it seemed that his timeline was slipping further out of reach. "How long are we talking?" Musk asked, trying to maintain his composure. "Possibly another year. We've identified the issues, but they're more complicated than we initially thought. It's going to take time to resolve them," Gwynne replied, her voice pragmatic yet tinged with frustration. Musk let out a slow breath, his mind already working through the possible solutions. "Okay, keep me updated. Let's not give up just yet. We've faced worse before." "We'll find a way to make it work," she said, a note of determination in her voice. "But I think you need to brace yourself. The media is going to have a field day with this." Musk chuckled dryly. "When don't they?" After the call ended, Musk sank into his chair, running his hands through his hair. The weight of the mission to Mars, the pressure from investors, the growing skepticism from the public, it was all starting to feel overwhelming. And it wasn't just business anymore. There were people who believed in him, people who had invested their time, money, and energy into his vision, and they were depending on him to make it happen. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from his longtime friend and colleague, J.B. Straubel, co-founder of Tesla. It simply read, "Meet me at the usual spot. We need to talk." Musk didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and headed out the door, determined to clear his head. The usual spot was a small, nondescript cafe near Tesla's headquarters, a place where Musk and his inner circle often met away from the prying eyes of the media. As he walked in, he spotted JB sitting at a corner booth, looking thoughtful. "Hey, JB. What's up?" Musk asked as he slid into the seat across from him. JB looked up, his face lined with concern. "Elon, I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been thinking a lot lately about how we're doing things, how you're doing things." Musk raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You're pushing the limits." "I get it. I've always gotten it. But I'm seeing more and more people in the company struggling. People are working 16-hour days, burning out, and not getting the recognition they deserve. And then there's the media. They're relentless. They don't see the sacrifice. They don't see the vision. All they see is a guy who can't keep his companies afloat." Musk sat back, feeling a pang of guilt. He knew that the people around him were giving everything for the mission. But he also knew that the pressure on him was different. It wasn't just about keeping Tesla and SpaceX afloat, it was about changing the future of humanity. "I know," Musk said quietly. "I don't know what to do anymore. The mission is too big. I can't afford to fail." JB sighed. "You don't have to do it alone, Elon. You have a team. And you have people who believe in you. But we also need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of the people who are helping make this possible. You can't carry all this weight on your own." Musk looked down at his hands, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. For the first time, he realized how much of the burden he had been internalizing. He had always seen himself as the one who had to do it all, who had to push the limits and break through the barriers. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let others carry part of that load. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "It's hard to let go. I'm afraid that if I don't stay in control, everything will fall apart." JB's expression softened. "It's not about letting go of control, Elon. It's about trusting the people around you. You don't have to do everything. You just have to lead." Musk sat in silence for a long moment, taking in JB's words. The weight of responsibility had always been something he carried alone, but for the first time, he realized that maybe the solution wasn't to carry it alone but to share it with those who believed in the mission as much as he did. "I'll try," Musk said finally, his voice resolute. That night, as he drove home, he thought about what JB had said. The journey to change the world was never going to be easy. But it was never meant to be. And as the moonlight reflected off his car's windshield, Musk made a silent promise to himself: he would fight, not just for the future, but for the people who were helping him build it. The world was about to change, and Musk wasn't going to face that challenge alone. He would lead, but he would also trust. He would fight, but he would do it with others by his side. And maybe, just maybe, that was the key to moving forward. Elon Musk knew that facing challenges was part of the process. It had always been that way. But the challenges he was now encountering felt like a different kind of storm, a storm that threatened not only his companies but his entire vision for the future of humanity. In the wake of the Mars mission delays and growing media criticism, Musk found himself at a crossroads. The mounting pressures of leading both SpaceX and Tesla were weighing on him more than ever before. He had always been a man who thrived on stress and pressure, but even he had limits. What started as a burning desire to change the world had morphed into something far more complex. The stakes had grown, and so had the consequences of failure. After the conversation with JB, Musk began to rethink his approach. The advice to trust his team and delegate more was something he hadn't fully embraced before. He had always believed that he had to shoulder the burden alone. After all, it was his vision, his dream. But the more he reflected on JB's words, the more he understood that a true leader not only directs the path but also empowers those around them to share in the responsibility. The first step in that process came a few weeks later, during a critical meeting at Tesla's headquarters. The room was filled with key executives, engineers, and product managers, all anxiously awaiting Musk's next move. The pressure was palpable. Tesla's future depended on a series of critical product releases and the smooth integration of new technologies into the electric vehicle ecosystem. Musk stood at the front of the room, looking at the faces of the people who had been with him from the beginning. They had been through so much together. Early struggles with financing, challenges with production, and the ever-looming uncertainty that came with pioneering a new industry. These were the people who believed in his vision, who trusted in his leadership. But as he glanced around the room, Musk could feel the weight of his responsibilities more than ever. He had built an empire, but at what cost? Were the sacrifices worth it? Were they even sustainable? Okay, everyone, Musk began, his voice steady but weary. Let's get down to business. We've got a lot of work to do, and we can't afford to waste any time. The room fell silent, all eyes focused on Musk. We've been facing setbacks, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, we're in a tough spot. But this is the moment where we either double down and push forward, or we let fear take over. And I know I've been guilty of doing that. I've let the weight of all of this bear down on me. I've tried to do it all myself. But that's not sustainable. Not for me, and not for any of you. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The room was still, but the tension had shifted. It was as if a new energy had entered the space. I need each of you to take ownership of your part of this mission, Musk continued. I'm not going to pretend I can do it all. We're a team, and we've always been a team. And we're going to succeed or fail together. The room was quiet for a moment, but then Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, spoke up from the back of the room. Elon, we're with you. We've always been. We'll do whatever it takes. Musk nodded, his gaze shifting to the engineers seated at the long table. I know that. And that's why I'm telling you all this now. I need you to understand the weight of the future we're trying to create. But I also need you to understand that we can't do it alone. Not anymore. There was a palpable shift in the room, one that had been a long time coming. For years, Musk had been the sole driver of the vision, the one person everyone relied on for direction. But now, he was acknowledging that leadership was more than just pushing forward. It was about empowering others to share in the journey. As the meeting continued, Musk felt a sense of relief he hadn't expected. It was as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't alone in this anymore, and he didn't have to carry the burden by himself. The meeting ended on a hopeful note, with each team member committed to taking a more proactive role in the coming months. Musk could sense the renewed sense of purpose in the room. It wasn't just about achieving goals anymore, it was about changing the world, together. The next few weeks proved to be a turning point. With the collaborative energy within Tesla and SpaceX, the teams managed to address many of the technical challenges that had been holding them back. At Tesla, engineers worked tirelessly to refine the new battery technology that would be critical for the next generation of vehicles. Meanwhile, at SpaceX, the issues with the Falcon Heavy were resolved, and the Mars mission was back on track, albeit with a slight delay. But it wasn't just the technical progress that Musk was excited about, it was the renewed spirit of collaboration within his teams. There was a newfound sense of unity, a belief that they could weather any storm together. Musk's decision to trust his team, to open up about his own vulnerabilities, had made a difference. They weren't just working for him anymore. They were working for each other, and for a common cause. However, with the progress came the inevitable media storm. The headlines were relentless, questioning Musk's leadership and the long-term viability of his companies. But this time, Musk didn't flinch. He had made a decision to push forward, regardless of the noise. His focus was clear: the future of humanity depended on the success of his ventures. And that future wasn't going to be shaped by the opinions of critics. One particular evening, as Musk sat in his office, reading through the latest batch of press clippings, a message popped up on his phone. It was from J.B. Straubel. The message simply read, "How are you holding up, Elon?" Musk smiled to himself, appreciating the support of his old friend. He quickly typed a response, "Better than I was a month ago. We're moving forward, and the team is stronger than ever." JB's reply came almost instantly, "I knew you'd get through this. Keep pushing, my friend." The words were simple, but they reminded Musk of something important. He wasn't alone. He had a team. He had friends who believed in him. And together, they were capable of achieving things that others could only dream of. As he leaned back in his chair, Musk allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he felt confident that the journey wasn't just about the destination, it was about the people he was traveling with. And that made all the difference. The reckoning had come. The test of character was over, and Musk had emerged stronger, not because he had done it alone, but because he had learned to trust others along the way. With his renewed perspective, he was ready for the next chapter of the mission. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always been a man who thrived in the eye of the storm. His ability to remain calm under pressure, to push forward despite setbacks, and to chase audacious dreams had been his hallmark. But as he sat in the boardroom the next morning, facing a group of key executives from both SpaceX and Tesla, he realized that the storm he was in now was unlike any he had faced before. For the first time, he wasn't just battling external forces, he was fighting against the very foundations of his own empire. His companies had grown to a point where every decision, every new project, carried massive stakes. The media scrutiny, the pressure from investors, the regulatory challenges, it all seemed to intensify with every step forward. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, there was a palpable sense of optimism in the room. Tesla's new electric battery was performing better than expected, SpaceX had successfully resolved the Falcon Heavy issues, and the Mars mission was back on track, albeit delayed. For all the criticism and doubt that Musk faced on a daily basis, there was one thing that he had come to realize: progress was being made. Slowly, but steadily. Still, he knew that much of the progress made was still fragile. Behind the scenes, there were countless forces at play, forces that Musk didn't always have full control over. The media was relentless, poking holes in every success, and every new development was dissected in ways that often missed the bigger picture. Investors, once hopeful, were becoming more cautious as the risks mounted. Even within his own teams, the pressure was starting to wear on some of the brightest minds he had assembled. As he scanned the faces of his team in the meeting room, he could see the mixture of determination and exhaustion in their eyes. They were all in it together, but the road ahead was long, and the journey was taking its toll. Musk had pushed his people hard, maybe too hard, but there was no turning back now. "We've made progress," Musk began, his voice firm but tinged with a note of exhaustion. "Tesla's new battery technology is going to be a game changer. And SpaceX is on track to make the Mars mission a reality, though it will take a little longer than we originally hoped. But none of this matters if we don't continue pushing forward. The world doesn't wait for anyone." The executives nodded in agreement, but there was a sense of unease in the room. It wasn't the kind of unease that came from lack of belief in Musk's vision, it was the kind that came from the growing sense that the path ahead was becoming more complicated than they had ever imagined. "Which brings me to the point I want to make," Musk continued. "We have to recognize that we're not just in competition with other companies. We're competing with time. We're up against forces we don't always see, and we have to be ready for whatever comes next." One of the senior engineers, Sarah, spoke up. Elon, I don't think anyone doubts that we're facing fierce competition and external pressures. But what we're seeing more and more are internal challenges, internal friction. People are burning out. We've been pushing so hard for so long, and I'm worried that if we don't give our teams more space, we're going to lose some of the talent we've worked so hard to build. Musk let out a heavy sigh. Sarah's words weren't new to him. He had heard similar concerns from other key members of his team. The question of burnout was something he had long avoided, focusing instead on the next big breakthrough, the next hurdle to overcome. But now, he was faced with the reality that even the best minds needed rest, perspective, and balance to continue performing at the level he expected. I hear you, Sarah, Musk said, leaning forward. But we can't afford to slow down. Not now. The world needs us to succeed. I need you all to understand that. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He could feel the pressure in the room growing, like the walls were closing in on him. But he also knew that the success of Tesla and SpaceX had always been about more than just the technology, it had been about the people, the minds, the visionaries who had come together to make it happen. Without them, nothing would have moved forward. I know we're all feeling the strain, Musk continued, his voice softer now. But I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourselves for this mission. I'm asking you to give it your all, just like you've always done. And I'll do the same. We need to keep pushing, but we also need to take care of ourselves. We're in this together. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for Musk, one that he wasn't used to showing in such a public way. But it was a necessary moment. The stakes were high, and everyone in the room needed to understand that this journey wasn't just about technology, it was about people, relationships, and the collective effort to shape the future. Over the next few weeks, Musk worked closely with his teams to address the growing concerns. He set up new protocols to ensure that employees were getting the time and space they needed to recharge, and he made a concerted effort to engage with his team on a more personal level. It wasn't enough to simply lead from the front, he had to lead with empathy, understanding that the human side of innovation was just as critical as the technological side. Tesla's battery technology continued to make impressive strides, and SpaceX successfully launched a number of smaller missions that paved the way for the Mars mission. However, as things began to stabilize internally, Musk couldn't ignore the increasing external pressures. The media was still skeptical of his every move, and investors were becoming more cautious with each passing quarter. While the companies had made incredible strides, the road ahead was still filled with obstacles. One evening, as Musk was scrolling through the latest headlines about Tesla's stock performance, he received a call from one of his closest advisors, Tim. The conversation was quick but unsettling. Elon, I hate to say it, but the regulators are coming for us, Tim said, his voice tight with concern. There's talk of new regulations for autonomous driving that could set us back years. If this goes through, we're looking at a massive delay, and the fallout could be significant. Musk's pulse quickened. The autonomous driving technology was one of Tesla's most ambitious projects, and it was one of the key differentiators that set them apart from competitors. If the regulators were going to impose stricter standards, it could halt their progress in its tracks. I'll handle it, Musk said, his voice cold and determined. We can't let this stop us. Not now. Tim hesitated for a moment before responding. Elon, I think you need to be aware that this isn't just about the regulators. There's a growing sentiment among the media and certain influential investors that you're spreading yourself too thin. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, it's all too much. You're fighting too many battles at once. Musk's grip on the phone tightened. The words stung, but he couldn't afford to let them shake him. I've got this, Tim. I'm not afraid of a challenge. We'll find a way through this, like we always do. The call ended, but the words lingered. Was he spreading himself too thin? Was the cost of chasing his dreams higher than he was willing to pay? As he stood by the window, looking out at the darkened city, Musk knew that the road ahead would only get more difficult. But he had never been afraid of difficulty. The only question now was whether he could hold on long enough to see it through. The long road ahead was filled with unseen forces, but Musk had always believed that the greatest challenges were the ones worth pursuing. And he wasn't about to stop now. Elon Musk stood before the press in a sleek, minimalist conference room, his usual calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside. The headlines had been relentless for weeks: Musk under siege, Tesla's future in question, and most notably, regulators target Tesla's autonomy. It felt like the walls were closing in, and no matter how fast they innovated, it seemed there was always another hurdle waiting. This time, however, it wasn't just a technical challenge, it was a battle of wits with the very forces that had helped him build his empire. Regulators, powerful investors, and the media. As the cameras flashed and reporters jostled for his attention, Musk's mind was in overdrive. The proposed regulations on autonomous vehicles could cripple Tesla's progress. If the new rules were enacted, it would not only slow down their production timeline, it could change the entire landscape for the future of electric vehicles. And the worst part? These regulations weren't based on real-world data or technological limitations, they were a political game, a strategic maneuver by those who feared Tesla's disruption of the traditional automotive industry. The press conference had been arranged as a way to address the growing concerns surrounding the company's technology. But Musk knew that this was more than just a press event. It was a carefully constructed moment to demonstrate that Tesla was still in control, that they could weather any storm, no matter how high the stakes were. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal was the first to speak, her voice sharp and inquisitive. "Mr. Musk, there's growing concern that Tesla's autonomous driving software is too risky. Regulators have stated that it's a matter of public safety. How do you respond to these accusations?" Musk looked at her, his expression unwavering. "Let me be clear, Tesla has always prioritized safety. Our vehicles are equipped with the most advanced sensors, real-time data processing, and AI-driven capabilities. The data doesn't lie. Our autonomous driving system has been proven to reduce accidents, save lives, and advance the future of transportation." The room fell silent as he spoke. He knew the statistics, how Tesla's autopilot system had been involved in far fewer accidents than traditional vehicles. But the reality was that the media didn't care about the facts. The narrative had already been set, and Musk was now playing defense in a game he didn't even want to be in. Another reporter chimed in. "But there have been incidents involving Tesla's autopilot. Isn't there a point where the risks outweigh the rewards?" Musk took a deep breath, keeping his emotions in check. "There have been incidents, yes. But let me remind you that no technology in its early stages is perfect. That's why we continue to improve. That's why we're working tirelessly every day to make our system better, safer, and more reliable. These regulations are being pushed through based on fear and political pressure, not science." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Musk was laying it on thick now, but he wasn't wrong. Tesla's technology had made enormous strides in the autonomous vehicle industry, but it was always going to be a target. There were powerful lobbies who would stop at nothing to slow down Tesla's progress. Big oil, traditional automakers, and even competitors in the tech world, they all had stakes in keeping things the way they were. A third reporter stood up. "Isn't it true that these regulations are part of a larger effort to rein in the power of tech giants like yourself? There are growing concerns about monopolies and unchecked power in Silicon Valley." Musk's eyes narrowed. This was the real question. The question that, deep down, he knew he would have to confront sooner or later. It wasn't just about Tesla's technology anymore, it was about his own place in the broader landscape of power. "I'm not a politician," Musk said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm an engineer, a visionary, and a businessman. But I will say this, there are forces at play here that don't want to see progress. They fear change. They fear the disruption that companies like Tesla represent. But I'll tell you one thing, they can try to stop us, but they won't succeed. We're in the business of changing the world, and that's something you can't regulate away." Musk's words hung in the air as the room erupted into questions and noise. For a brief moment, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The battle had escalated from a regulatory issue to a full-blown war of ideologies. The truth was, Musk wasn't just fighting for Tesla's survival anymore, he was fighting for the very idea of innovation itself. He was fighting for a future that others weren't ready to accept. The press conference ended, but the questions remained. What would happen next? Would the regulators back down, or would they double down, stifling Tesla's progress with cumbersome regulations? And most importantly, who would win this battle of wits, the disruptors or the establishment? As Musk left the conference room, he was greeted by his advisors, including Tim, who had been watching the proceedings from the back of the room. "That was intense," Tim said, his tone cautious. "You handled it well, but this is far from over. The regulators aren't going to back off just because you gave a good speech. They've got the power now. They're going to push for a decision sooner rather than later." Musk nodded, his mind already shifting to the next battle. "I know. But we can't afford to let them control the narrative. We need to hit back with facts, data, and public pressure. The public is on our side, and we need to make sure they know what's at stake." Tim looked skeptical. "Public pressure can only do so much, Elon. This is a political fight now. If the government decides to go after Tesla, it's going to be a long road. And I don't need to tell you how quickly things can escalate with the media. You've seen how they turn on people once they sense weakness." Musk's expression hardened. He wasn't weak. He wasn't scared. He had built Tesla and SpaceX from the ground up, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him. "I'll handle it," Musk said again, his voice firm. "This is just the beginning. The world is changing, and we're the ones leading it. Let them try to stop us. It's only a matter of time before they realize that they can't." As Musk stepped into his car and headed back to his office, the weight of the battle began to settle over him once again. This was more than just a fight for Tesla. This was a fight for his legacy, a fight to ensure that his vision for the future would prevail. In the coming days, the stakes would only get higher. The battle for the future of Tesla, for the future of technology, had only just begun. And Musk was prepared to outsmart the establishment, no matter what it took. The next move would be crucial. Musk had always prided himself on staying one step ahead, whether it was in the tech world or in the battles of business strategy. But now, the situation felt different. Every move he made seemed to be met with resistance from all sides: regulatory hurdles, media pressure, investor concerns. The weight of it all was almost palpable. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the world around him fell silent, he felt the fire that had always driven him, the relentless desire to prove that the future he envisioned was possible, even in the face of insurmountable odds. It had been a few days since the press conference, and while the media had played up his defiant remarks, the true battle was taking place behind closed doors. The regulators were still circling Tesla like sharks, and the corporate and political factions aligning against him seemed to be growing stronger. But what Musk had realized in the past few days was that this wasn't just a battle of technology versus bureaucracy, it was a battle of minds, a chess game of the highest order. He needed to anticipate their next move. He needed to figure out how to outsmart those who thought they could slow Tesla's progress with red tape and legal maneuvers. And in this battle, every decision mattered. Musk had always believed in the power of data. If the regulators wanted to claim that Tesla's autonomous vehicles were dangerous, then he would show them just how much safer they were compared to traditional vehicles. If the media wanted to paint him as a reckless visionary, he would show them the cold, hard facts. Musk was a master at finding the perfect counter to every challenge, and this would be no different. Sitting in his office, Musk reviewed a series of reports on Tesla's performance. The data was clear: Tesla's autopilot had significantly fewer accidents per mile than conventional vehicles, and the number of fatalities involving Tesla vehicles was far lower than industry averages. But it wasn't just about the numbers. Musk knew that to win this fight, he needed to shift the narrative. He called Tim into his office, the senior advisor who had been with him through thick and thin. Tim entered the room, looking more tired than usual. There was a nervous energy in his step, as though he could sense the weight of the looming battle that was about to unfold. "You know what I'm thinking," Musk began, looking up from the reports. "We're going to shift the conversation. This isn't just about technology. It's about safety. And more importantly, it's about control." Tim raised an eyebrow. "Control? How do you mean?" Musk leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We've been letting them dictate the narrative. They want to make it about regulation, about safety concerns. But what they're really doing is trying to slow down progress, trying to maintain control over an industry that's changing faster than they can keep up with." Tim nodded slowly, understanding where Musk was going. "You're saying we need to take the narrative back. Show them that we're not the ones who need to be controlled. The regulators can't keep up with the speed of innovation." "Exactly," Musk said. "We need to frame this as a conversation about the future. If they want to regulate us, fine. But let's show them what the future looks like without us. Let's show them how much better it could be if they don't stand in our way." For the next few days, Musk and his team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, crafting a new strategy. They compiled data, created compelling narratives, and prepared a series of public relations pieces designed to take control of the conversation. Tesla wasn't just a car company, it was a symbol of progress, of what the future could look like when innovation was allowed to thrive. The turning point came when Tesla scheduled a high-profile event in Silicon Valley. Musk had invited a select group of journalists, tech influencers, and even a few key regulators to witness a demonstration of Tesla's autonomous driving system. It wasn't just about showing off the technology, it was about making a bold statement to the world. The event began with Musk standing at the front of a large room filled with eager attendees. A massive screen behind him displayed a live feed from one of Tesla's autonomous vehicles as it navigated through a mock city filled with obstacles. The car was gliding smoothly, making real-time decisions based on traffic conditions, pedestrians, and other vehicles. The technology wasn't perfect, but it was incredibly close. "This is the future of transportation," Musk began, his voice resonating with confidence. "We're not just building cars. We're building the future of safe, autonomous driving. A future where accidents are minimized, where people's lives are protected, and where technology works in harmony with humanity." The journalists were captivated, some taking notes furiously while others captured footage with their phones. Musk knew the power of a live demonstration. When people saw the technology in action, they couldn't deny its potential. But what was truly remarkable was the level of control Tesla had over the situation. Musk continued, his eyes scanning the room. "The data shows that Tesla's autonomous system is significantly safer than human-driven vehicles. In fact, our system has saved lives, and we're only getting started. The regulators have a role to play, but they must understand that stifling innovation is a disservice to society. We can either lead the way, or we can fall behind." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent for a moment, and then the questions began to pour in. A reporter from the New York Times raised her hand. "Elon, what do you say to critics who argue that Tesla's autonomous vehicles still aren't foolproof? That there are too many potential risks involved?" Musk didn't flinch. "No technology is perfect, especially not at the outset. But the truth is that the risks we face today are far lower than the risks we face with human drivers. It's a matter of moving forward, learning from our mistakes, and constantly improving." The questions continued, but Musk was prepared for them. He answered each one with precision, never backing down, always shifting the narrative back to Tesla's core message: innovation, safety, and the undeniable progress they were making. As the event came to a close, the mood in the room had shifted. There was no longer an air of doubt about Tesla's technology, instead, there was a sense of awe and respect for what they had accomplished. Musk had done it again, he had outsmarted his critics by framing the conversation on his own terms. Later that night, as Musk sat in his office, reviewing the coverage from the event, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The media's tone had changed. The critics had softened, and even some of the regulators who had been outspoken against Tesla's autonomous technology were starting to take a more measured approach. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. The battle was far from over. The regulators would still have their say, and there would always be obstacles ahead. But for the first time in a while, Musk felt like he was in control of the game. He had outsmarted them, at least for now. And in this game of chess, he knew he couldn't afford to make a misstep. The road ahead was long, but one thing was certain, Musk wasn't done yet. He had always believed that progress was the only way forward, and he was willing to fight for it every step of the way. The future, as always, belonged to the bold. And Musk was nothing if not bold. The morning after the Silicon Valley demonstration, Elon Musk stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, staring out over the city with a rare moment of calm. The buzz from the event had not only shifted public perception but had sent ripples through Tesla's competitors, the media, and, most importantly, the regulators. Musk's mind was racing, as always, but this time it wasn't with thoughts of the next tech breakthrough or the next space mission, it was with thoughts of how to keep the momentum going. Though his press event had garnered significant media attention and had made his position stronger, the fight against regulators was far from over. What Musk didn't anticipate was that the key to winning might not come from doubling down on technology or public relations, but rather from an unlikely source. Later that morning, as he sat in a meeting with his core team, there was a knock on the door, and in walked someone Musk had never expected to see, Anjali Patel, a senior regulatory advisor who had once worked closely with the Department of Transportation. Anjali had become well known for her sharp legal mind, and she had played a pivotal role in drafting some of the earliest regulations that now governed the tech and auto industries. Most notably, she was someone who had once been a vocal critic of Tesla's rapid push towards full autonomy. Her sudden arrival at Tesla's headquarters was unexpected, and Musk couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. "Anjali," Musk said, standing up from his chair. "I didn't expect you here. I thought you were still working with the government." Anjali smiled, a tight-lipped but knowing smile. "I was. But I've been watching what you've been doing with Tesla, and I've come to believe that I might be able to help. The system is flawed, and someone needs to speak up for innovation. I'm here to help you." The room fell silent as everyone exchanged looks. Anjali was well respected in Washington, and her insights into the regulatory world could be invaluable. Yet, Musk couldn't shake the suspicion that something bigger was at play. Why was she here now? What had caused this shift? "What exactly are you offering?" Musk asked carefully. "I'm offering my knowledge of the regulatory landscape. The government is moving to impose heavy restrictions on autonomous vehicles, and they have a very particular narrative in mind. But I know how these things work, how they think, how they strategize," Anjali explained, her voice low but firm. "You've got the tech, Elon, but if you want to win this, you need more than data and public opinion. You need someone who can help navigate the political labyrinth." Musk studied her, intrigued but cautious. "And why help us now, Anjali? What changed?" Anjali paused for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if weighing the decision. "Because, Elon, you're right. The government doesn't want change. But change is inevitable. And someone needs to be on the right side of it." Musk felt a stir of realization. This wasn't just about Tesla anymore, it was about the entire future of technology and innovation. Anjali had seen the shift in Washington, the reluctance to embrace progress, and now, she was ready to work from the inside to change that. For a moment, the two of them shared a quiet understanding, Musk, the entrepreneur, the visionary, Anjali, the insider, the regulatory expert. They were an unlikely pair, but together, they could create a formidable force. Anjali quickly began to work with Musk's team, analyzing the legal documents, regulatory reports, and policy proposals that were being pushed through by lawmakers. She was blunt but strategic, and Musk came to rely on her insights more and more. Together, they crafted a counter-strategy that was as political as it was technological. They would target the key decision-makers, those sitting in influential positions, those who could shift the course of the regulatory tide. But rather than simply opposing them, Musk and Anjali decided to offer solutions. They would show the government that Tesla wasn't the enemy of regulation, it was a willing partner in ensuring that safety standards were met, that progress could continue, and that the future of autonomous driving could be achieved with the right balance of oversight. One of Anjali's first pieces of advice was to work directly with lawmakers who were on the fence about autonomous technology. Some were afraid of the unknown, others were simply driven by political pressures. But there were a few, especially in the tech-friendly districts, who were open to change. Let's start small, Anjali suggested during a meeting in Musk's office. You don't need to change everyone's mind at once. We need to build a coalition. Lawmakers who understand what Tesla represents and how autonomous vehicles can be a game changer. We can get them on our side first. Musk was quick to agree. So, we're playing the long game here. Exactly, Anjali replied. The short-term regulations may be hard to push back against, but if we can build enough support and demonstrate that Tesla isn't just an automaker, it's the future of transportation, then the tide can turn. Musk knew this was going to be difficult. Politics was not his strong suit, and the idea of navigating through political channels was alien to him. But with Anjali by his side, he felt more confident. She had a unique perspective, she understood the inner workings of the system and could anticipate moves before they were made. For the next few weeks, Tesla began to form alliances in Washington. Anjali's contacts were invaluable, helping to open doors and foster meaningful discussions. Musk found himself in meetings with congresspeople, senators, and key policymakers who were slowly being won over by Tesla's vision of a safer, smarter future. It wasn't easy, but progress was being made. Back in the public eye, the narrative around Tesla had shifted. Media outlets that had once been skeptical of Musk's bold predictions were now starting to take a more positive stance. Some of the larger tech publications even began to question the motives behind the regulators' push to stifle Tesla. A few high-profile journalists began to write pieces questioning whether regulators were doing more harm than good. Is regulation slowing down progress? One headline read. Is the government's fear of innovation putting our safety at risk? While this wasn't a complete reversal of the negative press Musk had been receiving, it was a sign that the tides were turning. The public was starting to see Tesla as more than just a company under fire. They were seeing it as a symbol of the future. As Musk reviewed the latest news coverage, he felt a rare sense of optimism. The battle was far from won, but with Anjali's help, they had begun to shift the game. They had the right strategy now. Tesla was no longer just fighting for survival, it was fighting for the future. And this time, it seemed they had the right people on their side to win. But even as Musk felt the momentum shift in his favor, he knew that the next few months would be crucial. The regulatory battles were just beginning, and the forces against him were far from done. The question was no longer if Tesla would succeed, it was how much harder Musk was willing to fight. And knowing him, the answer was simple, as much as it took. The air in Musk's office felt different now. The energy had shifted. What had once been a quiet intensity, something almost familiar to him, had become charged with the unpredictability of a game in its final stages. The pieces on the chessboard were in place, but the endgame was drawing nearer, and Musk knew better than anyone how quickly the tide of battle could turn. Tesla had become more than just a company. It was a battleground. Musk's actions had placed him at the center of the most significant regulatory fight in decades, a fight that had the potential to define the future of autonomous technology. But as the stakes grew higher, so did the risks. Anjali Patel, the regulatory insider who had come to Musk's side, had proven to be a powerful ally. Under her guidance, Tesla had successfully built a coalition of lawmakers and policy experts who were now lobbying for favorable legislation. However, the opposition was just as organized. Washington's political machinery wasn't going to let go of the fight that easily. Powerful corporations and entrenched industry figures, many of whom saw Tesla's disruption as a threat to their power, were beginning to turn up the heat. Musk's instincts told him that the final push would need to come soon. If they didn't act now, the momentum could fizzle out, and Tesla could be buried under a mountain of regulations that would slow their progress indefinitely. But he also knew the risks. Moving too fast could make it look like they were trying to bulldoze their way through the system. If that happened, the backlash could be disastrous. For the first time in a long while, Musk found himself questioning just how far he was willing to push. Could he continue to outsmart the system, or had the world finally caught up to him? The breaking point came in a series of tense meetings held over several days. A key player in the game was a senator from a powerful state that housed one of Tesla's largest manufacturing facilities. Senator Blake Thornton had been one of the fiercest opponents to Tesla's rise in Washington. But he had been careful, choosing to wield his power with restraint, preferring backroom deals to public confrontation. Thornton had his own reasons. Tesla's success threatened the traditional car industry in his home state, and with it, his political donations. He had ties to some of the largest car manufacturers in the world, and the last thing he wanted was to see them overtaken by a Silicon Valley upstart. But there was more to it than that. Blake Thornton was playing a long game, and Musk knew that if he didn't make a decisive move soon, it could mean disaster for Tesla's future. Anjali had been tracking Thornton's moves, and she suspected that he was about to introduce a new piece of legislation that could set back Tesla's progress by years. It was a targeted bill, one that would impose more stringent testing and licensing requirements for autonomous vehicles, effectively freezing Tesla's ambitions for full autonomy. "This is it," Anjali said, her voice urgent as she leaned over the table in Musk's office, scanning a draft of the bill. "If this goes through, it's game over for us. We won't be able to hit our deadlines, and the pressure will be too much for the company to handle." Musk's eyes narrowed as he absorbed the information. He had known this day would come. Blake Thornton was playing his hand, and Musk had no choice but to respond. But how? He could try to fight the bill head-on, but that would be risky. It could paint Tesla as an enemy of regulation, and the public might not be ready for that kind of confrontation. Then, a thought struck him. It wasn't enough to fight back. It was time to show everyone who was truly in control of this narrative. "Get me a meeting with Thornton," Musk said, his voice calm but unwavering. Anjali looked surprised. "You want to meet with him? Do you really think he'll listen?" "I don't care if he listens," Musk replied with a sharp edge to his tone. "I just need him to understand that we're not backing down. But it has to be done carefully. We need to get him to the table. If we can convince him that this fight isn't just about Tesla, it's about the future of the industry, then we have a chance." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Musk flew to Washington, arriving with his usual entourage of advisors, including Anjali. The atmosphere was tense. For Musk, it wasn't just about making a deal, it was about asserting his dominance in a world where his every move was scrutinized. If he could take control of this conversation, the game would be over. When they arrived at Thornton's office, the senator was waiting for them, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face impassive. He didn't smile, didn't offer any pleasantries. He simply gestured for them to sit. "Mr. Musk," Thornton began, his voice neutral. "I assume you know why you're here." "I do," Musk said, leaning forward, his eyes steady. "But I think we should start by being honest with each other. You're trying to regulate us out of the market. I get that. But we're here because we believe that if we sit down and talk, we might find a solution that works for everyone." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "A solution? You mean a way for you to keep breaking the rules?" Musk smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. "The rules are meant to keep us safe, and we respect that. But you and I both know the game has changed. The traditional car industry is dying, and the future is here. It's not just Tesla, it's the entire transportation industry. If we don't adapt, we're all going to be left behind." There was a long pause. Thornton looked at Musk, sizing him up. You think you can just rewrite the rules because you're a billionaire? Musk didn't flinch. No. But I think we can rewrite the future because we have the vision, and we're ready to take the risk. And if you want to be on the right side of history, you'll help us make that happen. Thornton leaned back in his chair, clearly unsettled. He had expected a confrontation, not this level of persuasion. Musk wasn't just fighting for Tesla's survival, he was fighting for the entire future of transportation. And somewhere, deep down, Thornton knew that Musk's words weren't far from the truth. After several hours of tense conversation, a deal began to take shape. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Musk and Anjali had managed to get Thornton to agree to a modified version of the bill, one that would allow for more flexibility in the testing requirements while still maintaining a basic level of oversight. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a significant step forward. As Musk left Thornton's office, he felt a sense of triumph. This wasn't the end of the fight, it was just another battle won. The road ahead would still be challenging, but with the right strategy, Tesla was one step closer to its ultimate goal. And Musk, as always, was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't just fighting for a company, he was fighting for the future of the world. And in this game, no one played with the same intensity as him. The real test had only just begun. Musk's victory in the meeting with Senator Thornton had temporarily quieted the storm of regulatory opposition. But like all victories in Silicon Valley, it was far from permanent. The media buzz surrounding the deal quickly faded as other stakeholders began to react. If Musk thought the battle was over, he was sorely mistaken. The forces arrayed against him were far more complex than just a few key senators and lawmakers. A new wave of resistance emerged from the very heart of the traditional automotive industry. The likes of Ford, GM, and Chrysler, along with their decades of entrenched lobbying power, were not ones to sit idly by while a Silicon Valley tech mogul reshaped the landscape. In the weeks following Musk's deal with Senator Thornton, these companies began to mobilize. A series of high-profile advertisements appeared, sponsored by the Automotive Industry Coalition, which painted Tesla as reckless, irresponsible, and potentially dangerous. The ad suggested that Musk's push for full autonomy was a rash decision driven by greed, one that ignored the real risks to public safety. It wasn't just about the technology, these ads targeted the very idea of putting self-driving cars on the road. One ad featured a somber-looking family standing next to a wrecked car, with a headline that read, "What happens when we let the machines drive?" It wasn't the first time Tesla had faced criticism, but this campaign was different. The messaging was sophisticated, targeting not only lawmakers but the general public. The goal was clear: if Tesla couldn't be stopped in Washington, it would be stopped in the court of public opinion. And that was a battleground Musk had yet to fully conquer. Elon sat in his office late one evening, scrolling through social media and news outlets. The flood of negative headlines was relentless. Tesla was being painted as a company that was pushing too hard, too fast. Musk's face appeared everywhere, on TV screens, in op-eds, in YouTube videos. Each narrative was the same: Tesla's ambition was out of control, and it was time for the company to be reined in. But it wasn't just the media. He could feel the weight of the backlash beginning to shift public sentiment. Even in places like Silicon Valley, where he had once been hailed as a visionary, doubts began to creep in. Investors, who had been riding high on Tesla's meteoric rise, began to hesitate. Tesla's stock, once soaring to new heights, began to dip. Anjali had been tracking the resistance from within the traditional automotive sector, and she was the first to break the news to Musk. The news was worse than expected: an influential figure in the Department of Transportation, someone Musk had once counted as an ally, had suddenly gone silent. This person had been a key supporter of Tesla's push for autonomy, but now, there were whispers that they were being influenced by automotive lobbyists. The coordinated effort to undermine Tesla's progress was gaining momentum. Musk, who had spent so many years outrunning obstacles, now found himself feeling the pressure. He had always believed that pushing harder, working longer, was the answer. But the rules had changed. And as Tesla's future seemed to hang in the balance, he realized he would need more than just technology to win. He needed to take a step back and reimagine the entire strategy. The next morning, Musk called for an emergency meeting with his leadership team. It was a tense room. Anjali, who had already briefed him on the latest resistance, was sitting across from him. The room buzzed with unease, but Musk's face remained impassive. "We need a new plan," Musk began, his voice sharp. "The industry is going to fight us tooth and nail. We can't just react to every attack, we need to start shaping the conversation ourselves." Anjali spoke up, her tone more serious than usual. "You're right, Elon. But the problem is not just the regulators. It's public perception. If we lose that, the fight is over." "Exactly," Musk agreed. "We need to stop playing defense. We need to get ahead of this. We need a narrative that's stronger than just Tesla pushing innovation, we need to show that this is a movement. A movement that's not just about cars, but about changing the entire way people live and work." The room went quiet as the team processed Musk's words. This wasn't just about Tesla anymore. This was about making the case for the future of humanity's relationship with technology. Musk wasn't just fighting for a car company, he was fighting for a new era of transportation and innovation. The following days were a whirlwind of planning. Anjali, Musk, and their team worked tirelessly on an aggressive counteroffensive. They began to strategize a series of media campaigns that would do more than just defend Tesla, they would define what Tesla stood for. It was time for Musk to address the public directly, not just as a CEO, but as a visionary, as someone who could inspire a movement. Tesla launched a high-profile campaign, Drive the Future. The campaign was bold and unapologetic. It featured Tesla's self-driving cars navigating city streets, alongside footage of people from all walks of life, young and old, from cities and rural areas, talking about how the world would change if cars didn't need drivers. The most powerful part of the campaign was Musk's personal message, delivered via a live-streamed event. He spoke directly to the audience, bypassing traditional media outlets. The message was clear, and the tone was urgent. Somewhere along the way, we stopped believing that progress was possible. The idea that we could use technology to make the world a better place, safer, cleaner, more efficient, became a distant dream. But we're here to remind you that innovation isn't just about the technology we build. It's about what we're building for the future of humanity. At Tesla, we're not just trying to make a better car. We're trying to create a world where accidents are reduced, where emissions are cut, where people can trust the machines that drive them. This isn't just a business. This is a movement. Musk's words reverberated across the globe. Social media exploded with discussions. Some called him a visionary, others a madman, but one thing was certain, his message was getting through. He had reframed the conversation. Tesla was no longer just about self-driving cars, it was about a global movement toward a smarter, safer, and more sustainable future. The public reaction was mixed. While some embraced Musk's vision, others remained skeptical. The traditional automotive companies ramped up their opposition, calling Tesla's claims unrealistic, even dangerous. The backlash from within the industry intensified, with calls for more stringent regulations and even demands for a nationwide moratorium on autonomous vehicles. But despite the opposition, Musk knew that the battle had shifted in his favor. His message was resonating with the public, and more importantly, with influential figures who had the power to shape policy. For Musk, the next step was clear. He had won the narrative battle. Now, it was time to double down and continue the fight. He wasn't just going to change the auto industry. He was going to change the world. And, as always, he was willing to fight for it, no matter the cost. Elon Musk had weathered the storm, at least, that's how it seemed from his office high above the busy streets of Palo Alto. The public relations offensive had turned the tide in Tesla's favor, but Musk knew that battles in Washington, D.C., and corporate boardrooms could not be won by public sentiment alone. The fight was far from over. Despite the swelling support from the public and from some unexpected corners of the tech industry, the stakes had risen. New challenges were emerging, and they were more dangerous than anything Musk had faced before. The adage, "Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer," rang in his mind. He'd fought off the pressure from the automotive giants, but now, the real battle was beginning. While his company was gaining allies on the surface, behind the scenes, a darker and more complex network of opponents had begun to make their moves. The first signs of trouble came when Anjali Patel entered Musk's office one morning, her face grim. She held a dossier in her hand, thick with reports, articles, and memos from the past week. Musk didn't need to ask what was in it, he could already see the tension in her eyes. "We've got a serious problem," Anjali said, setting the stack of papers on the table. "I don't think we've seen anything like this before." Musk leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He had braced himself for bad news, but the kind of resistance that Anjali was alluding to sounded different. It wasn't just about lobbying. This was something more covert. Anjali opened the folder, pulling out a memo from one of Tesla's own engineers. "It seems like someone inside the company might be working against us." Musk's brows furrowed. "Who? And why would they sabotage us?" "The memo suggests that some of our top engineers, high-level ones, are being courted by competitors, specifically the traditional automakers. We've seen this before, luring talent away with promises of higher pay and better job security. But this time, they've been going after our autonomous vehicle experts." Musk's face tightened. Losing talent was one thing, but a coordinated internal sabotage was an entirely different threat. It was a whisper campaign in the making, and if these engineers had inside information, the repercussions could be devastating. "They want our tech. They want our secrets," Musk said softly, the realization sinking in. "And they don't want us to succeed. Not because we're not making a great product, but because we're threatening their entire existence." Anjali nodded. "Exactly. There's more, too. We've received word that there's a potential leak of confidential software codes, Tesla's proprietary data. If that gets into the wrong hands, we're talking about a game changer, Elon. Our tech is our differentiator. Without it, we're just another car company." Musk had always prided himself on being able to see around corners. His ability to anticipate obstacles before they emerged had gotten him through countless hurdles. But this was different. The scale of what they were up against now wasn't just about tech development, it was about corporate warfare on a scale Musk hadn't fully anticipated. To make matters worse, Tesla's reputation as a disruptor was still a double-edged sword. Their competitors weren't just building cars, they were actively seeking ways to dismantle Tesla's strategy by targeting the very core of its innovation. The immediate course of action was clear. Musk would need to escalate Tesla's internal security. This wasn't just about engineers or designers anymore. It was about protecting the vision and ensuring that Tesla's innovations remained protected from internal sabotage. Musk set in motion a strategy to beef up the company's security infrastructure, bringing in high-level cybersecurity experts, tightening access to classified software, and establishing a more thorough vetting process for all personnel. It was a move designed to reassert control over Tesla's internal systems and prevent further leaks. But it was a double-edged sword. It would also increase internal tension, and he knew the culture at Tesla had always been one of openness and innovation. More security meant more oversight, and that could alienate the very people who were pushing the company's boundaries. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., things were also heating up. The political winds had shifted, and Tesla's success had made it a lightning rod for political maneuvering. The same politicians who had previously been supportive of Tesla's goals were now being pressured by lobbyists from Detroit's big three automakers to take a tougher stance. The reality was clear, Musk wasn't just facing internal sabotage, he was now in a battle of epic proportions for control of the future of transportation. Tesla had become a symbol of Silicon Valley's power, and that made it a prime target for political interests trying to hold on to the past. Thornton, the senator who had previously agreed to some compromise on Tesla's regulatory hurdles, had begun to waver. Musk had caught wind of rumors that Thornton was under pressure from a coalition of lobbyists to change his stance. Anjali's inside sources were telling her that the senator was about to introduce new legislation that could set Tesla back months, if not years. "We need to move fast," Anjali said one evening as she briefed Musk. "If Thornton does this, we're in for a real fight. And it's not just about regulations anymore, it's about the future of the entire tech industry. If they succeed in crippling Tesla, it'll send a message to everyone else in Silicon Valley. Don't disrupt the status quo." Musk stood up, walking toward the window, his mind racing. This wasn't just about Tesla anymore. This was about the future of technological progress itself. He had a choice to make: fight back aggressively or find a way to neutralize the threat at its core. "What are our options?" Musk asked, his voice calm but with an edge of determination. Anjali paused for a moment before answering. "We could go public with what we know, call out the corruption, make this about the political influence of the traditional automakers. It's risky, but it could win us some allies." Musk turned and smiled, a glint of steel in his eyes. "No. I don't want to fight for the moral high ground. I want to outsmart them. We don't need allies. We need leverage." Musk's strategy was to strike at the heart of the automotive industry's vulnerabilities. If traditional automakers wanted to make him the villain, he would give them a new villain to focus on, one far more dangerous. Musk's plan involved turning the narrative against the very institutions that were trying to block him. He wasn't just going to play the game, he was going to change the rules. He had a reputation for doing the unexpected, and this time, he would need to do the same. It was time to use their game against them. The next day, Musk took an unexpected step: he called a press conference. His message? It was time for a shake-up. The days of corporate greed and political influence deciding the future of transportation were over. If the traditional automotive industry wanted to make him the villain, then he would show the world the true face of the system they had fought so hard to maintain. The press conference was set for the next day, and the world was watching. Musk, ever the showman, knew that this would be his moment, not just to defend Tesla's future but to change the very nature of the fight. And as he stood in front of the cameras, the world waited to see what Musk would do next. The battle for the future of transportation had reached its boiling point, and Musk was about to make his most daring move yet. The following day, the press conference was set. The tension was palpable in the air. Elon Musk, standing in front of a sea of reporters and cameras, was ready to make his move. The stage was set in Tesla's sleek, glass-walled headquarters. Behind him, the towering Tesla logo gleamed brightly, a symbol of his company's bold ambitions and disruptive nature. It was the perfect setting for the announcement that would change everything. Musk had always known how to control the narrative, how to turn any press conference into a defining moment. This one, however, would be different. It wasn't just about defending Tesla. It was about taking the fight to his opponents in a way no one would have expected. If the traditional auto industry wanted to make him the villain, he would give them something far more frightening than they had bargained for. As the event kicked off, the room quieted. Musk, dressed in his signature black t-shirt and jeans, stood at the podium. He glanced at the crowd of reporters, their pens poised and cameras trained on him. His expression was calm, but there was an underlying intensity in his eyes. "Good afternoon, everyone," Musk began. His voice was steady, yet commanding. "I know you've all come here to hear about the future of Tesla and our role in the transformation of the automotive industry. But today, I'm going to talk about something far more important than that." He paused, allowing the room to settle further. Every eye in the room was now fixed on him. "What I'm about to say is going to shake the foundation of everything you think you know about the future of transportation," he continued. "Because the battle we're fighting here at Tesla isn't just about cars. It's about something far more critical, the future of innovation itself." Musk leaned in slightly, as if to emphasize his next words. For too long, we've seen big corporations, especially the traditional automakers, use their influence over politics and public perception to stifle progress. They've made deals behind closed doors to preserve their dominance, ignoring the real potential of technology to make the world a better place. And now, they're trying to do the same with Tesla. He could feel the weight of the room's anticipation. He had their attention now. The reporters were on edge, sensing that this press conference would be unlike any other. But this isn't just about Tesla. This is about something far larger than us. It's about the future of humanity and whether we're going to let the status quo dictate that future or whether we're going to take control of it. Musk's voice grew more impassioned. I've been told by many people that my approach is too bold. Too risky. That we're moving too fast. But I say, what's the point of progress if we don't push the boundaries? What's the point of being a leader if we don't change the world? The room was electric now, the reporters scribbling down every word, sensing that Musk was about to deliver something monumental. The reality is this: we've already won the battle for innovation. But the real challenge ahead of us is bigger than I could have ever imagined. It's not just about self-driving cars or electric vehicles. It's about whether we, as a society, are going to allow a few large corporations to control the future or whether we're going to allow true innovators, people with the courage to act on their ideas, to shape that future. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. Then, he dropped the bombshell. Today, I'm announcing that Tesla is taking the fight to the very heart of the industry. We will be filing a formal lawsuit against some of the largest and most powerful players in the traditional automotive sector, companies that have manipulated the system to their advantage. Companies that have used their money and influence to slow down progress. Musk's eyes narrowed. He had said it. The lawsuit was now in motion. The narrative was about to shift dramatically. The lawsuit isn't just about Tesla, it's about ensuring that future innovators, the ones who dare to disrupt the status quo, will not be bullied or silenced by those who have too much power and too much influence. This is a message to every entrepreneur, every startup, and every engineer who believes in the power of progress: we will not let you be held back by the established elite. Musk's announcement hit the airwaves like a lightning strike. Within hours, the news was everywhere. On social media, in news outlets, across the globe. Musk was once again the center of the conversation, but this time, he wasn't just defending Tesla. He was making a direct challenge to the forces that had been trying to undermine the very nature of progress. The automotive world, specifically the giants that had tried to crush him, was now on the defensive. They had underestimated Musk's resolve, and now, he had thrown down the gauntlet. No one saw this coming. No one knew how far Musk was willing to go to ensure that Tesla, and innovation as a whole, wouldn't be crushed under the weight of outdated systems. The impact of Musk's bold move was immediate. The lawsuit, while still in its early stages, sent shockwaves through the automotive industry. The very companies that had worked to stifle Tesla's rise were now facing public scrutiny on a scale they hadn't anticipated. And Musk had made it clear, he wasn't just taking them to court. He was going to make sure the entire world saw exactly what they were doing. The media coverage was relentless. Headlines screamed, "Musk takes on the auto giants," and "Elon Musk files lawsuit against traditional auto manufacturers for sabotaging innovation." The backlash against the established companies was swift. Politicians, who had once been on their side, were now forced to weigh in. Public opinion was swaying in Tesla's favor, as the public began to understand just how deep the corporate manipulation went. And Musk was just getting started. This wasn't going to be a quiet battle. This would be a war for the future of innovation, and Musk had made his opening move. But even as the lawsuit dominated the headlines, Musk knew that this fight would be long. He had to stay focused, on the battle in the courts, on the political front, and in the hearts and minds of the public. The next steps would be crucial, and he had to ensure that his legal team was prepared for whatever came next. But there was another, more personal challenge looming over him. The question of how far he was willing to go. He was already facing resistance from within Tesla, from regulatory bodies, from the media, and from the very people he was trying to help. He had promised to change the world, but at what cost? As Musk sat alone in his office, staring out at the vast horizon, he knew that this was just the beginning. The world was watching, and he wasn't going to back down. This was the turning point. This was the moment that would define the future of transportation, and Musk was ready to lead the charge, no matter what it took. The tide had turned. And Elon Musk was about to make history. The courtroom was silent. Every seat in the federal building in D.C. was filled: senators, journalists, industry executives, Tesla engineers, and the curious public all gathered to witness the climax of one of the most high-profile tech versus legacy industry cases in American history. At the center of it all, Elon Musk. After weeks of explosive revelations, internal documents, and whistleblower testimonies, Tesla's lawsuit against the traditional automotive industry had reached its final moments. But no one, not even Musk's legal team, knew exactly how the judge would rule. The allegations had shaken the industry: collusion, sabotage, backroom deals, regulatory manipulation. It was more than a lawsuit, it was a referendum on the very soul of American innovation. Judge Mary Ellison, a no-nonsense federal judge with decades of experience, walked in briskly and took her seat. The murmur of the room dropped to a hush. Elon Musk versus the Automotive Coalition, she began. Over the past 6 weeks, this courtroom has heard arguments from both sides regarding a series of actions intended to obstruct technological innovation and damage Tesla's ability to compete fairly in the marketplace. She paused and glanced over the room. This case is unprecedented in scope. We are not just addressing a contract dispute, but something far more complex: the weaponization of regulation and influence in an attempt to prevent disruptive progress. Musk sat silently, hands folded. Anjali sat beside him, her eyes locked forward. The room held its collective breath. In the matter of anti-competitive conduct. Judge Ellison paused. This court finds substantial evidence that members of the Automotive Coalition engaged in coordinated efforts to undermine Tesla's operations through both political and media influence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Musk remained stone-faced, but his mind was racing. Judge Ellison continued. While the court stops short of ruling this as a criminal conspiracy, such a decision lies with the Department of Justice. The civil penalties and injunctions requested by Tesla are justified. The ruling was clear: Tesla had won. The fallout was immediate. News outlets blasted the story across every platform: judge rules in favor of Musk, automotive giants found liable for anti-competitive practices. Wall Street responded with shock. Tesla's stock skyrocketed. Traditional auto stocks plunged. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the exposed corruption, and a long overdue investigation into the regulatory capture of the transportation sector was opened. But what stunned the world even more was what Musk did next. 3 days after the ruling, Musk live-streamed a message: simple backdrop, no Tesla logos, just him and a chair. "I could have cashed in on this," he began, voice calm. "We could have used this judgment to punish our competitors and secure Tesla's dominance. But that's not what this is about." He leaned forward, his tone shifting from corporate to human. "This isn't about Tesla. It's about the future. I didn't start this company to win lawsuits. I started it because I believe humanity is capable of more." He paused. "We live in a system where progress is often seen as a threat. Where people in power try to hold back those with bold ideas. But the world doesn't move forward when we play it safe. It moves forward when we're brave enough to challenge the system, and smart enough to outthink it." He then announced something no one saw coming. Tesla would use 50% of the damages won from the lawsuit, nearly $500 million, to launch a new venture, Open Transit, a non-profit initiative designed to develop open-source autonomous vehicle frameworks that any company could use. "No more secrets. No more silos," Musk said. The future isn't about hoarding progress. It's about sharing it. The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech and auto industries. Open transit became an overnight movement. Engineers, coders, startups from around the globe rallied around the initiative. Within months, new innovations were being born from the framework Musk had made public. The same technologies once locked behind Tesla's firewalls were now fueling global innovation. Legacy automakers scrambled to adjust. Some tried to fight it. Others gave in and joined the initiative. Ironically, those who had tried to stop Musk were now being forced to adopt his model just to survive. But not everyone was thrilled. In a closed-door meeting in D.C., a group of powerful figures, corporate lobbyists, displaced regulators, and industry insiders, sat fuming. "We can't control him," one said. "He doesn't follow the rules," another added. A third leaned back, bitter. "Worse. He rewrites them." Musk hadn't just won the lawsuit. He had rewritten the rules of engagement. Back at Tesla HQ, Anjali walked into Musk's office with a rare grin. "You know what this means, right?" she said. Musk looked up from a blueprint of a prototype neural interface vehicle system. "We're not just changing cars," she said. "We're changing the very idea of what an industry can be." Musk nodded slowly. "Good," he said. Because cars were just the beginning. He turned back to the blueprint, already 10 steps ahead. This story wasn't just about a legal battle. It was about power, disruption, and the courage to challenge systems built to resist change. Musk didn't just win in court, he exposed the fear that innovation inspires in the halls of entrenched industries. But more than that, he showed the world what it means to play a long game, to use intellect, patience, and vision to outsmart an entire system designed to maintain the status quo. He didn't destroy the old world by force. He simply built a better one, in public. And by the time they realized it, it was too late. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with what you think the next big disruption will be. What would you do if the system told you no? Because maybe, that's where your real story begins.